Hi guys, Brian from Boas here. Are you intrigued by the idea of a Morph Boa, but scared away by the crazy sky-high prices? Well, fear not, my friend. Today I'm going to show you 5 inexpensive Morph Boas. These are great animals for a pet or for starting a morph breeding project. I'm also going to show you some of the combos that you can create. These are some of the genes that are used to make some of the more popular combo morphs out there. If you're new to the channel, this is the place for information on all aspects of keeping and breeding boa constrictors in captivity. So if you want to learn more about these amazing animals, be sure to subscribe to the channel. As I'm sure a lot of you guys know, the thing about Morph Boas is that when they first become available, they have these crazy sky-high prices. And it's a bit of a pyramid scheme because the people that get in on the top end up making a lot of the money from these crazy prices. But of course, the prices drop pretty quickly until they reach a much lower level. And the morphs I'm going to show you have all been around for at least around 20 years or so, and they've already depreciated pretty much all the way. So you don't need to worry that these morphs are going to drop in price anymore. In fact, some of them actually seem to be going back up in price. And these 5 genes I'm going to share with you, they're all approximately $200 to $300 market value at the time that I'm making this video, which isn't that much more than a regular, normal, non-morph boa. And in fact, you sometimes can find combos with more than one of these genes for about that same price. Or you could find a combo with a het. So there's a lot of value out there if you're looking for some boas to start a morph breeding project. And the first gene that's really a good value is called the hypo or hypomelanism gene. And hypomelanism means it has a much reduced amount of melanin, which is the black pigment. And so hypo boas are much lighter overall in color with reduction in black pigment. They generally have much more saturated colors and a cleaner look overall. So this animal is actually a hypomelanistic boa. This actually isn't just a straight hypo, this is a hypomeron. The meron is a incomplete dominant form of pastel. But this animal shows you pretty well what a hypo boa looks like. I don't have a straight hypo to share with you. So the animal has a much more highly saturated colors, a lot of oranges and pinks, as well as a reduction in the dark pigment. And the other thing with the hypo is that it changes the shape of the saddle. So if you look at the saddles, this animal has these bow tie shaped saddles, which is due to the hypo gene. The hypo gene can also cause some striping and some pattern aberrations. But it's a really cool gene. It's been around a while. When it first was available, these animals were many thousands of dollars. But now they're hardly any more expensive than a regular normal boa. It's probably the least expensive morph on this list that I have today. The hypo gene looks pretty cool by itself. And it can also enhance a lot of other morph genes out there. And hypo is an incomplete dominant gene. That means when the animal has one copy, it shows the physical characteristics associated with the gene. If it has 2 copies, it's called a super hypo, and super hypos have an even greater color saturation and reduction of the normal pattern. So hypo is a good starting place if you're looking for a pet morph boa or just want a gene to start a morph project. The next inexpensive starter morph gene on our list is the albino gene, or technically called the amelanistic gene, as these animals are lacking the black pigment melanin. And there are a number of different types of albinos. I actually did a previous episode talking about the different types, so check that out if you want more information. But probably the most likely starting place for someone new to morphs is the Cal albino gene. And this is the original strain of albino that's been available for around the last 30 years or so. And I remember when the first ones came out back in the early 90s, they were selling for around $10,000 a piece. And I thought that was crazy at the time. I mean, as you can imagine, $10,000 was an awful lot of money back in, 1991. So, fortunately, the price has come down a lot since then, and I picked this guy up about 5 years ago or so. He was actually my first morph boa, and at the time I paid around $300. And I remember just picking him up. I didn't have any plans to get into morph breeding. I just thought it was cool because I remember as a kid how expensive these things were. And the thing that's cool about this animal A lot of the call albinos lose their color over time. They fade out to the kind of this pale yellowish white color. But this is a selectively bred call albino bred by Al Brown, who's one of the best breeders out there for Morph Boas. But this particular animal has a Roni pastel background. It's got a pastel background with the cow albino gene, and it's also 25% true red-tailed boa. It's actually a hybrid animal. So because of this, this animal has retained his color a lot better than most of the call albinos. And the albinos are a good starting point. A lot of people make combo morphs with one type of albino as the base. And it should be noted, this is a recessive trait. So the animal has to have 2 copies of the albino gene to show the trait. So you can have heterozygotes which are carrying the gene but appear normal. And when you breed 2 heterozygotes together, you'll get 25% on average will be carrying 2 copies and have the albino trait. So when you're breeding a recessive mutation, it's a little bit harder than breeding or it's not harder, I should say, it takes a little longer than an incomplete dominant trait because you have to breed the hets together. Versus when you breed an incomplete dominant to an animal that doesn't have that gene, you'll get approximately half of the animals will be carrying the incomplete dominant trait. So just something to consider when you're thinking about your breeding projects. The next inexpensive boa morph gene is the Anari or Anaristic gene. And Anaristic boas lack the pigment erythrin, and this is the pigment which is associated with the yellow, orange, and red colors in boas. So when they're lacking this pigment, they have this beautiful silvery gray or brownish appearance. And so this is an Anaristic boa. There's actually a number of different types of Anaristic boas. I don't have one of the more common types which are associated with morph boas, but this is actually an Anaristic Paraguanera peninsula boa from Venezuela. And we can see the beautiful silvery gray coloration that this animal has. Although the more common types of Anaristic boas that are more commonly associated with morph projects have a very similar appearance. And the best specimens that have this beautiful silvery gray coloration like this one, this is probably the most beautiful Anaristic boa that I've ever seen, to be honest with you. Although there are some specimens of Anari boas that tend to get more of a brownish over time, and they don't have this beautiful silvery gray color. So make sure you shop around and pick one up that it has the nice silvery colors. Like the Hypomelanism gene, Anari gene is a recessive gene, which means the animal needs 2 copies to show the visual appearance of the Anari. And you can get a heterozygote that only has 1 copy that you could also use to breed this particular trait. And Anari is involved in a number of combo morphs. When you combine it with the hypo gene, you get a ghost boa. When you combine it with the albino gene, you get a snow boa. And when you combine it with albino and the hypo gene, you get what's called a moonglow boa, which I'll show you in a minute. The next inexpensive morph boa is called the jungle boa. And the jungle gene is a little bit confusing to a lot of people. I actually did a video previously titled The Enigmatic Jungle Boa, so be sure to check that one out if you want to hear more in depth about this particular morph. But I'll just say that the jungle gene is associated with a number of different traits, including enhanced color saturation, cleaner pattern overall, and sometimes striping or aberrancies to the saddles. And this is actually a jungle, but this is again a jungle Moran boa. I don't have a straight jungle animal to show you, so the Moran is an incomplete dominant pastel. But you can see the jungle gene is responsible for a lot of the color saturation and cleanliness of this animal, as well as the difference in the saddle shapes. So one giveaway is looking at these saddles. You can see they have this big wide dot in the center, 2 wide dots. Normally boas will have just a small slender slash in the middle, but with the jungle gene you frequently see this enlargement of the dots in the saddles. You also see a much cleaner pattern overall. Take a look at the tail on this guy. It's just so clean and crisp. See that beautiful pattern of the tail saddles? So the jungle gene really enhances a lot of different morphs. And it's a very commonly combined morph with other morphs. You see hypo jungles a lot, and you can pick up a hypo jungle for not much more than just a regular jungle. Hypo jungles you can also get that are het for albino or het for Anari, and these are a really good way to get into a morph project for not too much money. The jungle gene is another incomplete dominant gene. For example, this animal just has one copy, it's a straight jungle. But if an animal has two copies of the jungle gene, it's called a super jungle. And one thing that's currently not really well understood is how detrimental the super jungle is health-wise. So some people report that super jungles don't really do that well. They typically will die within a year or two, and they don't really grow very well. Other people report that they've gotten their super jungles to adulthood and they've been healthy. As far as I know, no one's bred a super jungle at this point, so there's some speculation that it might not be a fertile morph. So you might want to think twice about breeding two jungles together to create a super jungle. So there's one more inexpensive morph gene on my list of the 5 that I actually don't have to show you today, and that's called the motley gene. And the motley gene is a pattern abnormality that has these perfectly shaped circles going down the back of the animal. Motleys also have a much cleaner looking pattern overall. So when I first saw the motley gene, I really wasn't that taken in by the gene. I didn't think it was all that cool looking, but I've seen quite a few combos lately that do look kind of cool looking. And the thing with the motley gene is, since it cleans up the overall pattern, when you combine it with some other genes, it will definitely enhance those other genes. Like if you combine it with the IMG or increasing melanin gene, you get a much darker animal just because of the larger areas of the saturated black pigment. So you get almost a solid black animal. You can also combine it with the amelanistic and anaristic gene to get a motley snow or motley moon glow if you throw in the hypo gene, and this causes the animal to be much cleaner looking overall and kind of much more of a pure white color in the case of the snow or moon glow. The other thing with the motley is that this is not a gene that you want to have in the super form. So it's another incomplete dominant gene. But when you have two copies of the motley gene together, you get animals which don't really do well at all, and they typically only live for about a year or two. So you want to stay away from breeding two motley animals together, because the resulting 25% of the resulting offspring on average will be super motleys that aren't going to live very long. Now I'm going to show you a couple animals that are examples of combo morphs that you can create by combining these different genes together. And the first one I want to discuss is something called a sun glow. The sun glow is a combination of the albino plus the hypo. So as I mentioned, a lot of the cow albinos tend to lose their color as they age and they get kind of washed out looking. But when you combine in the hypomelanistic gene, you get an animal with a more saturated color that retains its color better as it ages and reaches adulthood. You can also throw in a third gene, the jungle gene, and you have something called a junglow or jungle sun glow, and this is an example of a call junglow. But the jungle gene further enhances the saturation of the color. So this animal just looks really beautiful, really deep saturated oranges and yellows. This animal is about 2.5 years old now, and her colors have only been getting better over time. You can see how beautiful and clean looking her belly coloration is. And then the head markings on this animal, there's this beautiful orangish head markings. I got this junglow from Peter Mestry of Motion Reptiles, who is one of the best Morph Boa breeders out there. And this particular animal is also of the lipstick line. And the lipstick line is a specific line of cow albinos which has been selectively bred to have enhanced color saturation and retain the colors longer. So just a beautiful animal overall. So one more animal for today's video, and this is a combo morph called the moon glow. And what the moon glow is a combination of the cow albino, the anaristic, and the hypo gene. And so you can see this animal has a pretty amazing look to it, just this beautiful creamy whitish coloration. If you can see, the eyes of these animals are also really cool. They have these kind of white eyes. They're not pure white moon glows. You can see the barely visible pattern of the boa. You can see it has the bow tie shaped saddles due to the hypo gene. And then you can see these tail saddles are almost this pale lavender, almost translucent in coloration. Really remarkable looking animal. So they do get some of a creamy yellowish color. This animal has actually gotten a little more yellowish as he's aged. This guy is only about 6 months old or so. So as adults, they're kind of more of a creamy yellowish color, but definitely a really unique looking animals. So whether you're into morphs or not, you really have to admit that this is an impressive looking animal, and it's one of the morphs which I believe is deserving of the title of living art, and something if you showed to your non-boa keeping friends, they're definitely going to be impressed by, you know, the beautiful looks of this animal. Incidentally, if you use a different type of albino like the sharp or the VPI albino, you have a similar looking animal, but it's called a snow glow, either a sharp snow glow or a VPI snow glow. So that was a little bit about some inexpensive morph boas if you're looking for a pet or to start a morph breeding project. I hope this video was helpful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot me a line. Thanks for watching and enjoy your boas.